Speaking of spivvy bullshit, Valve just banned NFTs on Steam. If you don't know what an NFT is, lucky you. I wish I could go back to that time. But the long and the short of it is that NFTs are essentially a digital proof of ownership. So while lots of people can right-click, copy-paste this ugly-looking JPEG, I'm the smart guy because I'm the only one who paid $17 million for the digital certificate that says I own it. And I'm not messing with you here, by the way. Someone actually paid $17 million for this. Whether you like it or not, and I do not, NFTs are going to be a massive force in video games in the future because they set up the foundation for what's known as a play-to-earn economy, where games become proxy financial ecosystems that allow people to earn and trade items that have real-world value by virtue of the blockchain. The problem is that all of this is a regulatory nightmare right now. It's the Wild West out there, and a disproportionate number of operators in this space are just scammers looking to flip a quick buck out of the confused fear of missing out. Valve are looking to get ahead of this mess, updating their guidelines to make explicit that they won't permit any games that use blockchain technology or allow their users to trade cryptocurrencies or NFTs. This created a vacuum that was very quickly filled by Epic Games when CEO Tim Sweeney tweeted out that Epic would welcome games built on blockchain tech so long as it, quote, follow the relevant laws, disclose their terms, and are age-rated by an appropriate group, end quote. People very quickly pointed back to a tweet from Tim not 1 month earlier, where he explicitly states that Epic aren't touching NFTs as, quote, the whole field is currently tangled up with an intractable mix of scams, interesting decentralized tech foundations, and scams, end quote. That's one hell of a turnaround in a month, but I guess Epic can't be too picky about what they welcome onto their storefront when the Epic Games Store is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. This week, Boston Dynamics' greatest creation, which they nicknamed the Zuck, did his very best human impression as he tried to sell us on not only a future vision for his company, but also a future vision of humanity, not unlike that depicted in WALL-E, where we all get really fat and roll around on mobility scooters. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the metaverse cometh. If you don't know what that is, picture the VR-enabled wonderland of Ready Player One with the risk-free, kind of sordid escapism of Westworld Season 1, crossed with the enslavement of humanity in The Matrix, and throw in some rampant late-stage capitalism a la Cyberpunk, and you're there. It's like Second Life 2.0, only now all the tech giants on the planet want to make it a thing, so we're ultimately powerless to stop them. Zuckernerd has put the full weight of his empire behind this initiative, going so far as to rename the Facebook parent company Meta. Hard to plant a flag more deliberately than that. Still, it was hard not to laugh at the image of the metaverse presented by Zuck here. As gamers, we're all immediately aware of these features as they exist in other games and other platforms. The avatar-enabled connectedness of VR chat, the mass social events of Fortnite, the player-created worlds and transferable item economies of Roblox. The metaverse is probably going to be a thing one day, but when it is, it's going to be a hell of a lot different from this quaint vision of it here. Ubisoft is another company that has been mired in controversy for its toxic workplace culture, but this week they decided that not enough people hate them, so they're wading into the delightful world of NFTs. Ubisoft's latest initiative is called Quartz, and it kicks off in Ghost Recon Breakpoint where, and I shit you not, if you have played 600 hours of Breakpoint, you get given a shitty helmet that exists on some blockchain platform somewhere so you can sell it to someone else. The announcement was met with so much universal disdain that Ubisoft had to delist the video from YouTube, but that didn't stop the dislikes from pouring in, currently sitting at around 41,000 dislikes to just 1.6k likes. Great ratio there, Ubisoft, keep it up. If you need any more confirmation that NFTs are a massive scam, then I'm pleased to tell you that Peter Molyneux is now making an NFT game. Couldn't ask for better confirmation than that, really. By the way, did you guys see that Keanu interview where he dumpstered the concept of NFTs in 3 seconds flat? It's so good. Watch this.
And so when you think about the concept of digital scarcity and things that are, they can't be copied.
That are easily reproduced.
Well, but they're not the same, right?
Just when you thought you couldn't love Keanu anymore. God bless this man. Alright, let's do the fucking NFT news now. I feel like I'm gonna need to add a weekly section to the show next year to cover all of this garbage. Like This Week in No Fucking Thanks. Damn, that has a real ring to it. This week in No Fucking Thanks, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 developer GSC Game World decided they would cash in on over a decade's worth of hype and affection for their franchise by crudely cramming unnecessary NFT bullshit into their game. The result will shock you. Everyone hated it. It started with an announcement that GSC were planning to add a wide range of NFTs to their game, but the first would be a sort of auction, where whoever held the NFT after a certain period would have their likeness scanned into the game. It's unclear, but it appears as though this winner would also have to pay their costs to get to the studio, so that's nice. Win an auction for a chance to spend even more money. Love it. The backlash to this was a tidal wave of hatred, love to see it, with the entire gaming community ridiculing this as a shameless out-of-touch cash grab, and an unnecessary one at that. The auction they were proposing would have been totally doable without NFTs, so why do that? Realizing that they had made a terrible mistake, the developers took to Twitter to walk back the decision. And by walk back, I mean they put out a big-ass JPEG, doubling down on their initial announcement and explaining all the other NFTs they were going to add to the game later on, including putting people's names on stuff like desks and lamps in-game. Okay? The backlash to this double down was equally fierce, prompting GSC to throw their hands in the air, put out another JPEG announcing that they were pulling all NFT plans and basking in the appreciation of gamers, even though we shouldn't be thanking them for reversing a shitty decision. They knew we would all hate it and they did it anyway. We can say good, but I think saying thank you is a bridge too far. While GSC might have been shamed into submission, NFT software developer Ubisoft was not. Last week, the publisher announced Ubisoft Quartz, a god-awful open salvo in the wall we'll be fighting for the next few years as we try to get game makers off this newly discovered grift. Quartz is very innovative technology in that it makes really bad games even worse. Case in point, if you play Ghost Recon Breakpoint for 600 hours, you get a dumb-looking helmet. If that sounds stupid to you, you're not alone because Ubisoft staff think the same thing. This week, Kotaku reported that Ubisoft's internal forums have been flooded with debate and dissent on the topic. They quoted a few staff as follows, quote, "I still don't really understand the problem being solved here," wrote one employee. "Is it really worth the extremely negative publicity this will cause?" Another asked, "How can you look at private property, speculation, artificial scarcity, and egoism, and then say, yes, this is good. I want that. Let's put it in art." End quote. Well said, Ubisoft employees. Well said. To their credit, Ubisoft's head honchos have listened to this feedback, and they don't give a fuck. This week, blockchain entrepreneur and Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot addressed his staff with one clear message: NFTs are here to stay. According to Ubisoft staff who attended the meeting, Guillemot is said to have linked the outcry to the introduction of DLC, microtransactions, and loot boxes, implying that these things will all get better with time, since obviously gamers are now 100% cool with microtransactions and loot boxes. Right, guys? The other message: apparently these Breakpoint NFTs are just the beginning. And while I don't believe much that comes out of Guillemot's mouth these days, I certainly believe that. As if to distract us from all of this, Ubisoft hastily announced a new Splinter Cell game this week. Typically, I'd be really excited about this, like, yeah, Ubisoft are finally doing it, etc., but I'm not really feeling it, to be honest. It's a Splinter Cell game, it's a remake of the original, it's early in development, and it'll have NFTs in it. I made up the last part, but I bet you I'm right. Ubisoft, more like Ubisoft NFT. I'm here all week, don't forget to tip your waitresses. With crypto, they aren't into that fiat shit anymore. October ended with a strange piece of news. Valve were banning any game using cryptocurrencies or NFTs. Not sure what those words mean, but that's okay, never mind. I'm sure we'll never need to think about those words ever again. Surprise! Everything is now an NFT that you buy with bullshit internet monopoly money so that you can look cool even when you're playing fake poker in your space station with Mark Zuckerberg and the people he paid to pretend to be his friends. That's right, Facebook, the worst company on the planet, thought they'd seal the deal and have the worst company name on the planet too. Meta. With one awkward, cringe-inducing video, the sentient synth we call the Zuck outlined a vision of the future that feels equally terrifying and inevitable. The metaverse is something a range of companies have been slowly working towards, particularly the likes of Epic and Roblox, but Facebook throwing their full weight behind it was the rocket fuel that supercharged this movement. And overnight, it felt like every brand was buying up fake real estate in whatever 2021 version of Second Life they could get their hands on. I know the metaverse seems like a distant dream right now, but companies are going to be spending billions to make sure it sneaks up on you real fast. So don't blink or you'll miss it. Alright, so you knew it was coming. Let's do it. Our most hated segment returns for its 2022 debut, the NFT block, or as I like to call it, no fucking thanks. This week in No Fucking Thanks, it turns out that both publishers and douche nozzle celebrities couldn't wait 5 damn minutes to start ruining 2022 with their NFT garbage. It started on New Year's Day with a message from Square Enix's CEO Yosuke Matsuda, who spent a hell of a lot of words outlining his plans to ruin video games in 2022. The crux of it was the idea that the old-fashioned play for fun notion was going the way of the dodo, clearing the decks for the new play to contribute model, which is a proxy term for play to earn game economies. His central thesis was that the blockchain and NFTs will allow people to create and monetize user-generated content, ignoring the fact that people have been doing this for literal decades without the aid of this technology. This was just a big blog post to investors that could loosely be translated to, yes, we too are planning to scam our consumers this way. Please buy more of our shares while we do that. When it comes to shitty companies ready to outright scam their consumers, there's very few top dogs more decorated than Konami, the once beloved game publisher turned shame gambling house turned industry laughingstock. Of course, they too got in on the NFT grift, announcing, wait for it, Konami Memorial NFTs. A fitting name, memorializing a time when Konami wasn't completely trash by selling nothing, just fake nothing, reminding everyone that Konami are now complete trash. By the way, they made over $150,000 selling JPEGs and GIFs to idiots, so you can see why companies do this. Depending on who you ask, the most disappointing NFT drop was from the man in the arena himself, Troy Baker. Now, if you haven't heard of him, you've certainly heard his voice, since Troy voices the likes of Pagan Min from Far Cry 4, Sam Drake in Uncharted 4, Higgs in Death Stranding, and tons more, capped off by his greatest performance, Joel from The Last of Us. Now listen, we could deal with Square's CEO and Konami and the Linkin Park dude all shilling NFTs, but when Joel is in on this grift, well, let's just say that Twitter dusted off its golf clubs and got to work. Troy was mercilessly dunked for announcing he was partnering with some dodgy-looking NFT project, promising the world but delivering nothing. And his tweet was the worst, since it was like, you can hate or you can create, what's it gonna be? And everyone was like, yeah, I'll take hate, thanks. The Sphere Hunter's response was so fucking mint. She's like, you can create this. Fuck yeah, Susie. Anyway, at the time of writing, Troy certainly hasn't walked back any of this, and he still appears to be partnering with an organization that has already been caught stealing other people's work, because that's basically what most NFTs are, theft. This concludes the first No Fucking Thanks for the year. Sadly, I expect this will be an increasingly meaty and vitriolic segment as the year goes on. I hope you guys will be along for the ride. Here's a good news story to kick things off. Facebook lost a boatload of money this week. Yeah! For a long time now, the Facebook has devolved into an increasingly aged and irrelevant platform. Old people still use it as an awkward hookup service and their number one source of vaccine disinformation, but most people below the age of 35 wouldn't touch this platform with a 40-foot barge pole. One time I asked some young people if they had a Facebook account and they laughed at me, like actual laughter. Like if someone were to ask you if you had a Stadia account. More on that later. Anyway, sensing that Facebook's days were numbered, sentient synthoid Mark Zuckerberg announced that he would be boldly taking his company where no company has gone before. The metaverse. The Zuck announced that Facebook was changing its name to Meta and that they would be going all in on the creation of a new virtual world where you can be a robot and play cards on a spaceship or something. It was a very cringe-inducing demonstration of what the metaverse definitely isn't going to be, as his quaint take was grounded more in Ready Player One fantasy than it was the actual emerging metaverse on platforms like Roblox or Fortnite. The market was none too pleased with this turn, being generally skittish about a pivot that seemed too big, too early, and too fanciful. The rubber hit the road this week when Facebook announced that for the first time in its history, the number of daily active users declined. In addition, advertising spend was down, with Facebook citing stiff competition from TikTok and YouTube. The fallout was catastrophic. Meta shares tumbled 26% in a day, a drop of over $230 billion worth of value, which reduced the Zuck's personal money pile by over $30 billion. Poor guy, now he only has $90 billion left. How's he gonna survive on that? So sad, breaks my heart. My biggest takeaway from all this is that the market certainly doesn't think that the metaverse is going to save Facebook. What was positioned as the next frontier for both social interaction and interactive entertainment is still nothing more than a fantasy that sits many, many years from reach. I'm sure we're going to see different versions of the metaverse emerge and evolve over the coming decade, but do I expect Facebook to be at the forefront of that? Not with promo videos like this, I don't. We're nearing the end of the news block, but don't worry, I left room for everyone's favorite segment, No Fucking Thanks. This week in No Fucking Thanks, Ubisoft asked, how could we win over our developers who have expressed outrage and disgust at our scammy NFT agenda? The answer? Give the developers some NFTs. Kotaku are reporting that this week Ubisoft started giving away NFTs to some developers as a means of celebrating the 20-year anniversary of Ghost Recon. What a shitty anniversary gift. To quote Kotaku, one developer likened it to the staff saying, "We hate crypto stuff," and Ubisoft responding with, "Okay, come get some." This wasn't the biggest NFT dunk of the week though. That title falls to Worms developer and publisher Team 17. Now I like Team 17. I've profiled many of their games on my channel in the past because they're an indie publisher and I like doing that. So you can imagine my disappointment when this week Team 17 announced that they were launching a special Worms NFT project where you can auto-generate some sickeningly ugly NFT art. As though there's any other type. The announcement was met with the typical ridicule reserved for these scams, but amplified by the fact that Team 17 publish a bunch of indie developers who have no problem at all calling out this rubbish. Aggro Crab is one such developer who took no prisoners when they publicly condemned Team 17's decision and said they would no longer be associating with them. Other developers joined in, and along with the general public outcry, Team 17 eventually did the walk of shame that is the inevitable endpoint of most NFT announcements, saying that they've listened and consulted and they were changing course. What a surprise. Never seen a worm do a backflip before, but there's a first time for everything, I guess. Speaking of worms and backflips, Andy Wilson. Just a few months ago, this dude unironically said during an EA earnings call that NFTs were, quote, the future of our industry, end quote. This week, in his most recent earnings call, Andy said that NFTs are not something that EA are currently, quote, driving on, end quote. When the CEO of the company that won Worst Company in America 2 years running starts to bend the knee, it can mean only one thing. We're winning, people. We're winning. One developer that's had no shortage of troubles, drama, and controversy of late is blockchain game publisher Ubisoft, who opened this week's No Fucking Thanks segment with the news that they've added their beloved Rabbids to a shitty pseudo video game known as The Sandbox, which is just a space for speculative NFT and crypto nonsense. It's a partnership so crappy and half-baked, it's not even worth talking about or explaining. The point is, Ubisoft staff hate it, just like they hate all the other NFT bullshit that Ubisoft management are pushing. This week, a report from Jason Schreier of Bloomberg pulled back the curtain on the internal war being waged within Ubisoft as passionate game makers try to rein in management's avaricious stupidity and propensity to self-own. Messages on the internal staff message board respond to NFT announcements with stuff like, quote, it's a deeply embarrassing day to work for Ubisoft, end quote. Another wrote, quote, are we competing with EA for the most hated game studio by the public title? Because this is how you do it, end quote. Fucking based. As bad as all this NFT shit is, it's actually not the worst thing going on at Ubisoft right now. That title goes to all the workplace harassment that has plagued the company for years and has still not been properly addressed. This week, employee group A Better Ubisoft put out a public letter saying that Ubisoft's management have met precisely 0 of their demands in the 200 days since they put them to Ubisoft. Their demands include stopping abusers from being promoted and relocated, a strategy Ubisoft employs as often as the Catholic Church, as well as a seat at the table when it comes to important decisions affecting staff welfare. Reasonable demands that Ubisoft leadership have remained all but silent about. You get the feeling that Ubisoft's head honchos are just trying to ride this out. Let's hope they don't get the chance to do that. These weren't the only abuse claims coming from a company driving an NFT agenda this week. Funny how those things go hand in hand, isn't it? Last week, Worms developer and indie game publisher Team 17 were publicly dragged when they announced and then abandoned a gaudy NFT program, and it looks like management's big brain moment opened a real can of worms. Okay, sorry about that. Following on from the public outcry and internal resistance, Eurogamer spoke to a number of current and former Team 17 staff members who described working conditions that are sadly all too familiar. QA staff being paid an absolute pittance, some of them unable to afford 3 meals a day, promised staff bonuses being cut in a year of record profits, instances of sexual harassment and workplace bullying being dismissed by HR, the general overwork of staff suffering to meet the demands of shareholders who demand infinite growth and return on investment. It's a story we've seen from so many big publishers and developers, but it stings that little bit more to see it occurring here in what we thought was just a wholesome indie publisher. Team 17 CEO Michael Patterson has responded to the report saying, quote, action has to be taken, end quote. But we've certainly heard that before from other CEOs, so the proof is in the pudding on that one. To be fair, a number of staff spoke with Eurogamer saying that they were cautiously optimistic about the CEO's response, so hopefully something comes of it. Alright, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, No Fucking Thanks. And it's mostly good news this week for a change. We'll do the bad news first. You won't believe this, but Take-Two Interactive are interested in NFTs. I know, shocking, right? How could the company that released the GTA Trilogy remaster be anything less than entirely scrupulous? By the way, did you guys see that those remasters sold over 10 million units and significantly exceeded Take-Two's expectations, proving once and for all that everything I say and do on this channel is utterly pointless. Anyway, Take-Two CEO and Stretch Armstrong before the accident, Strauss Zelnick, spoke to his investors this week and he said that he is, quote, highly convinced that there is an opportunity for NFTs to fit with Take-Two's offerings in the future, end quote. So yeah, we can absolutely expect some sort of NFT bullshit in GTA 6, so long as the scam hasn't run out of puff by then. One developer is holding firm against the NFT onslaught, even as his CEO lays bare his nefarious plans for an NFT takeover. I'm talking about Final Fantasy XIV director Yoshi P, who this week, when speaking as part of a live stream, addressed questions about the potential of NFTs arriving in Eorzea. It's a relevant question as the Square Enix CEO put out a really grim letter on New Year's Day of all days to announce that he was planning to send Squeenix balls deep into NFT territory. Yoshi P, absolute god emperor that he is, was quick to allay our concerns. Quote, I did mention it earlier, but based on how Final Fantasy XIV is designed, we don't intend on incorporating any NFT element in the game at this point. So if anybody is worried or concerned about it, I can clearly state at this time, we do not have any intentions to incorporate that into the game, end quote. Obviously, this is far from a definitive statement, but it's the best he can manage. At the end of the day, he answers to both his CEO and his shareholders, and if they decide it's going to happen, then that sucks, but Yoshi P's power has its limits. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. The tremendous goodwill that Final Fantasy XIV has cultivated over the past decade may not be entirely washed away with an NFT announcement, but it will certainly take a pretty massive and needless hit, and that would be a crying shame. The best NFT news this week came out of Platinum Games, who are in the headlines a lot this week as they talk potential acquisitions, the possible revival of Scalebound, and more. In one interview, company president Atsushi Inaba was asked about his thoughts on NFTs, and he gave an awesome response, quote, we haven't really been thinking about that. I understand it's a hot topic right now and it's really starting to gain momentum, but the way it's gained momentum has been focused on profitability for the company, with no positive impact on the creators or the users in any sense. Yes, exactly, thank you. So that's frustrating to see happen. The people who are trying to promote NFTs and partner with gaming companies, their conversations seem extremely one-sided. Hey, you're gonna make money, but how does it benefit the user or the creator? If you want to spend my time on something, I want it to benefit making good games, end quote. God, it is so refreshing to hear a developer talk like this. The interviewer then asked a follow-up question about how quickly Konami adopted NFTs, to which Platinum Vice President Hideki Kamiya responded, quote, not really. If it smells like money, Konami's gonna be there in a heartbeat, end quote. What an absolute fucking legend. Finally, let's finish up on some Gaben news because Gaben rules. With the Steam Deck releasing this week, Gabe took to the interview circuit where he provided his perspective on the state of the games industry and where it's at. Subscription services came up as a topic where Gabe confirmed that Valve had no plans for a Game Pass style competitor, but they'd be open to bringing Game Pass to Steam. Unsurprising, since that would mean that Valve would claim 30% of the subscription revenue, something I'm sure Microsoft isn't all that interested in. The conversation also steered towards the metaverse, a topic that Gabe has some piercing insight into. Quote, there's a bunch of get-rich-quick schemes around metaverse. Most of the people who are talking about metaverse have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they apparently have never played an MMO. They're like, oh, you'll have this customizable avatar, and it's like, well, go into Lanosia in Final Fantasy XIV and tell me this isn't a solved problem from a decade ago. Not some fabulous thing that you're, inventing, end quote. Like I said, Gabe rules. To cap things off, Gabe also provided some information on why Steam banned any game using crypto or NFTs, saying, quote, that's sort of where we're at with the blockchain NFT-based stuff. So much of it was ripping customers off. And we were like, yeah, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to enable screwing large numbers of our customers over. So that's what drove that decision. There's nothing inherently about distributed ledgers that make them problematic. It's just so far that's almost always what our experience has been, end quote. Like I said, Gabe rules. Speaking of which, that brings us to this week's edition of everyone's favorite segment, No Fucking Thanks. You know, I've really missed this segment this past week as game publishers have been all quiet on the NFT front. Luckily, someone has stepped up to fill the void. Dr. Disrespect. The doc had a big week this week, finalizing his lawsuit with Twitch without any reference to a settlement or neither party acknowledging any wrongdoing. We still don't know why the doc was banned, and he still refuses to tell anyone, so this is just going to be some Jimmy Hoffa level gaming mystery that will remain unsolved until Martin Scorsese makes a movie out of it. The doc was more forthcoming about his upcoming gaming project, however. He and a number of Call of Duty developer veterans formed a new studio called Midnight Society, and while the doc's community has been eagerly anticipating the first news about his upcoming multiplayer shooter, their patience was rewarded this week when Midnight Society pulled back the curtain to reveal an NFT drop. Apparently, you can go to the company's website and sign up to get some special commemorative NFT, which is free, but you can also buy a Founders Pass NFT for $50, which gives you early access to the game eventually and voting rights on game features. It's important to note that there is no game yet. It does not exist. The studio was only formed in December of last year, so they're surely just tooling up at this point. But hey, you can now buy an NFT for it, so yeah, that's a thing. It's funny timing because this week the Financial Times put out a deeply cathartic article detailing the fact that the bottom is falling out of the NFT market, with NFTs dropping an average of 50% of their value in the last 2 months alone. Daily trading volumes on OpenSea, the largest NFT marketplace, have plummeted 80% in a single month. God, I love it. This quote is so good. Ready? By the end of last year, there was a general sense that there was saturation in certain parts of the market, particularly in primate-themed profile pictures, end quote. God, that is good. I'm gonna frame that. I'm gonna mint that. This one's even better. Ready? Quote, I think many people will be scared and burned by this market and may never touch NFTs again, said one 19-year-old investor. Other members joked that they would be living off rice, porridge, and grass this month. Oh my god, please stop. I can't handle all this joy. The collapse appears to be reflected in the gaming industry, where January and February were characterized by new, disappointing NFT announcements from publishers every other week, but the past few weeks have been an NFT ghost town with no new announcements and a general feeling that publishers are pulling back owing to intense backlash. It's bittersweet to say it, but it appears as though no fucking thanks' days are numbered. Rest in peace, you brave warrior. We will never forget your sacrifice. While Ubisoft spins up a new offering in one hand, it winds down another in the other. And it brings us to this week's edition of No Fucking Thanks. God, I have missed this segment. This week, Ubisoft announced that Ghost Recon Breakpoint would no longer be receiving any new content. Now, that game was terrible, so that's not a great loss in and of itself, but recall late last year when Ubisoft unveiled their new NFT platform, Quartz, with the opening salvo delivered through Ghost Recon Breakpoint, where new players could grind up to 500 hours to unlock some dumb helmet NFT and then sell it on some stupid auction house website thing. Now, just over 4 months later, the game is essentially dead. How do you reconcile that? The promise inherent in an NFT is its potential to appreciate in value and to be sold or to be traded. That is the one thing that NFTs are designed to do above all else. But why the fuck would anyone want to buy or trade an NFT in a game that is essentially dead? If Ghost Recon Breakpoint had sold these NFTs instead of making them earnable, then we'd all be calling this a rug pull. But it feels like that in all but name anyway. A perfect reminder of why NFTs do not belong in video games at all. That's a lie. This next story is the perfect example. F1 Delta Time was an officially licensed F1 game that launched back in 2019. It wasn't much of a game, but as with anything related to NFTs, the point isn't fun or quality, it's money. And the cars in this game were selling for big dollars. For example, Kotaku reported that the most expensive NFT sold in 2019 across the entire NFT space was an NFT for a car in this game which sold for $100,000 US. Later on, some people would spend $300,000 in a single transaction in this game. Insanity. Fast forward to this week, and what happens? The developer fails to re-secure the Formula 1 license, and so the game must be shut down. The developer informed the community of the news, and they gave them 1 day to wrap things up before the servers were shut off. The developers are trying to start some new game and are promising replacement NFTs that are of equal value or something, but I'm gonna guess the dude who spent $300,000 on a make-believe car is, well, who knows what that person's thinking, because they're clearly a fucking idiot. So yeah, that is the perfect example of why NFTs and games just don't mix. That's a lie too, because this week the world's largest NFT game, Axie Infinity, was hacked. And do you know how much of other people's money was lost? around $650 million worth. The hack was announced by Axie Infinity's leadership team this week, who said that one of the platforms they rely on was hacked, allowing someone to withdraw a full 170,000 Ethereum. They are now working with authorities to try to recover the funds. See, the thing is, if we get hacked and lose some sword we grinded for in World of Warcraft, then that sucks, but life goes on. The problem with these pay-to-earn games is that developers become proxy financial institutions where people's entire livelihoods can depend on those developers safely securing their financial assets. And there is absolutely zero underwriting or guarantees to protect those people in the event of a hack like this. Just one of the many, many reasons why all of this sucks and should stay far, far away from the world of video games. Alright, it's time for no fucking thanks. I know you all worried that we'd won this war a little too quickly and that no fucking thanks would be retired faster than a Ubisoft NFT, but it seems as though at least one company is keeping the segment alive. Sega. A while back, Sega announced that they were working on something called the Super Game, which is a strange name for a Sega product. I would have thought they would have gone with something like Mega, but I guess not. Turns out the Super Game isn't a game per se, but more a collection of games that somehow connect to each other, possibly through NFTs. One Sega producer said, quote, "It's a natural extension for the future of gaming that it will expand to involve new areas such as cloud gaming and NFTs. We're also developing Super Game from the perspective of how far different games can be connected to each other," end quote. To be fair, this interview was done a month ago, but has only recently been translated by Video Game Chronicle, and the NFT landscape has changed a lot in those 4 weeks, and by that I mean it's kinda died. Love to see it. Still, the whole Super Game framework sounds really weird, pulling in different technology, studios, genres, all unified by the promise that the games will be AAA blockbusters. I don't know, man, this whole thing sounds a little pie in the sky right now for me. Square Enix are no fools though. They've learned from their live service mistakes from games like Marvel's Avengers and Babylon's Fall, and they've charted a bold new direction for the company. NFTs. This week in No Fucking Thanks, the Square Enix president Yosuke Matsuda doubled down on his deeply fucked up New Year's Eve address, where he tried to ruin everyone's night by outlining his plan to ruin video games in the year 2022. There was hope that with the recent collapse of the NFT market that Matsuda might have moved on from all this, but apparently not. Speaking this week to Yahoo Japan, Matsuda reiterated pretty much every point word for word, signaling that Square Enix are more committed than ever to developing NFT bullshit that absolutely no one is asking for. I have an idea. Take all that development money you'd spend on NFTs, give it to Eidos, and let them make Guardians of the Galaxy 2. We get a cool video game, you get some sales, and the added bonus is that people don't hate you, which I find to be pretty helpful most of the time, but I don't know, that's just me. There were rumors this week that Blizzard were making sexy eyes at NFTs, sending out a survey to people to gauge their interest in NFTs and play-to-earn games. Word got around and everyone was nervous about this until Blizzard CEO Mike Ybarra responded to a tweet on the matter, saying, quote, "No one is doing NFTs," end quote. While that may be true of Blizzard, I wish it were true more broadly, Mike. I really do. You want to know the real reason they're doing it though? This is from Square Enix's official investor statement on the matter. Quote, "The transaction enables the launch of new businesses by moving forward with investments in fields including blockchain, AI, and the cloud," end quote. Imagine offloading 1,100 talented developers during a talent war, offloading 3 studios with great track records, 2 legendary IPs, and over 50 back catalog franchises, all so you can play harder in the monkey JPEG space. Unbelievable. Okay, so this next story, I really couldn't believe it. Meta, aka Facebook, are balls deep on the metaverse. So balls deep, in fact, they are willing to lose an absolutely obscene amount of money to make it happen. How much? Well, in the last quarter, so just 3 months, Facebook lost roughly $3 billion in their Reality Labs division, which is an amalgamation of all their software and hardware initiatives to kickstart the metaverse. $3 billion in a single quarter. Remember at the start of this episode when I said that Embracer bought 3 studios and decades worth of established IPs for $300 million? This is 10 times that amount of money, and it was spent in a single quarter. What do Facebook have to show for it? Well, to be fair, the Oculus product is doing pretty well since that's a great piece of kit, but that isn't being purchased so people can spend time in the metaverse. That's being bought for Beat Saber and various VR websites. The actual metaverse that Facebook is trying to build is called Horizon Worlds, and man, you really need to see this. $3 billion a quarter for a game that looks like a worse version of Metopia. I really can't get over how bad this looks. VR chat is better than this. Rec Room is better than this. PlayStation Home was better than this, and that was in like 2008. Game developers I follow on Twitter were all aghast to see how much money Facebook is burning and the rate of that burn. And with so little to show for it, you really have to wonder when Facebook's shareholders step in and put an end to the Zuck's Ready Player One ambitions. I usually like to end the news block with some good vibes, but sadly, that isn't the case this week, because this final story is our most heartbreaking edition of No Fucking Thanks Yet. I regret to inform you, and this is hard for me to say, Reggie is an NFT, bro. Oh god, it hurts. It hurts so much. But it's true. Speaking at the SXSW Festival in Austin, Reggie was asked for his thoughts on crypto, blockchain, and NFTs when he gave this gut-wrenching response, quote, "I'm also a believer in the concept of play to own within video games," said Fils-Aimé. And I say this as a player where I may have invested 50 hours in a game, 100 hours in a game. There's some games I've invested 300 hours in a game. And when I'm ready to move on to something else, wouldn't it be great to monetize what I've built, end quote? Reggie offered an example, suggesting that many folks would be interested in buying his Animal Crossing New Horizons island, and how he would like to be able to monetize that. Quote, "Blockchain technology embedded in the code and in the development would enable me to do that, so I'm a believer in the technology and where it's headed," end quote. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to propose that we monetize Animal Crossing islands. I honestly give it no more than 3 months until Reggie announces that he's joined the board of some spivvy crypto NFT bullshit startup, because there is no way that he says something like this unless someone is paying him a lot of money to say it. Clock is running, people. 3 months. Set your watches. Just weeks after revealing they're spending $3 billion a quarter to manifest a metaverse that no one asked for, Facebook has announced that it will be cutting jobs in its metaverse business. Absolutely no one could have seen that coming, because absolutely no one is paying attention to Facebook's metaverse. Hey, it's been a while, but you've been a great audience, so what say we return to everyone's favorite segment, No Fucking Thanks. Man, it's been a hot minute, hasn't it? At the start of 2022, it felt like you couldn't swing a Bored Ape without hitting 15 different NFT gaming announcements, but as time's gone on and the scams, frauds, and hacks kept piling up, interest in this space has all but evaporated. That's not the real reason for the lack of game publisher interest though. The real reason is the bottom line, since NFT trading volumes and dollar spend has fallen off a cliff. The NFT JPEG index is an actual thing that humans have sadly created, and it's down 70% since its launch in April, and overall trade volumes on OpenSea have fallen 75% since May. You love to see it. It comes as Square Enix, who were famously bullish on NFTs at the end of 2021, clarified their stance on the matter. You might recall that they recently sold most of their Western operations to Embracer Group for an absolute song, promising to use the proceeds of the sale to fund, among other things, deeper investment in NFTs. The internet laughed heartily because imagine giving up Deus Ex and Tomb Raider and Soul Reaver and Thief and all that other shit just to get some monkey JPEGs. It sounds as though Square are realizing the error of their ways, since in a recent financial earnings call, they walked back this plan, saying they would no longer invest the proceeds of the sale into NFTs and would instead use them to bolster their core gaming business. From a truly cursed New Year's Eve address promising a play-to-earn utopia, to a fire sale in their Western operations to fund their NFT ventures, to completely pulling out and pivoting back to actual video games. And all of that unfolded in less than 6 months. NFTs are a hell of a drug, and I really hope someone makes a Wolf of Wall Street or Big Short movie about all this stuff in future, because I just find all this too entertaining and funny. We haven't done any no fucking thanks news this week, so why don't we kill 2 apes with 1 stone here in the feel-good story of the week block. Brazil recently held its International Games Festival, an event that brought together game makers, media, the public, and the investor class to showcase the future of video games. The event had a variety of sponsors, including a not insignificant number of NFT, blockchain, and Web 3.0 companies, all of them looking to ingratiate themselves with an audience that hates them and their product. Enter game developer Mark Venturelli, best known for the game Chroma Squad and currently working on Relic Hunter Legends, which is going to be published by Gearbox. He was due to deliver a speech to the event titled The Future of Game Design, but just a few minutes into his presentation he said, "Hey, I fooled you. This talk is actually titled Why NFTs Are a Nightmare."
The crowd went absolutely wild, as this is a room full of people who actually give a shit about video games, and anyone who actually cares about this art form is going to be pretty on board with someone hijacking an event sponsored by NFT bros to deliver a speech about why NFTs are hot garbage. The event organizers were absolute heroes. They knew what he was going to do and they approved it, and apparently the sponsors tried to end the presentation midway through, but the event organizers wouldn't allow it. As one person said on Reddit, they scammed the scammers, taking their money to fund the event and then using that event to dunk on them. Priceless. As gratifying as all of this theatre was, it was actually Venturelli's words that were the real highlight. He spoke passionately and persuasively on the subject, talking about the fact that NFT and blockchain enterprises try to buy their way into gaming and are splashing cash because they don't offer any actual value or solutions. Quote, "They're just trying to buy their relevance because they have no actual influence over the future of our industry. If you just give them this space uncontested, you're just giving them exactly what they want and buying their narrative that they're relevant," end quote. He also went on to talk about the concept of a trustless future and how dire that is. At a time when cooperation couldn't be more important, a technology framework based on not trusting anyone is not the cure for what ails us. It was a great dunk on NFT bros, it was a great mic drop moment, but it was also really insightful analysis of the issues at hand, so I really encourage you to check it out. I'll leave a link to that article and YouTube video below.